Hello, everybody, and welcome to our UFC 265 preview show. I am John Pollock, joined by Phil Chertok. The countdown is on. Lewis gone Saturday night from the Toyota Center in Houston, Texas. How are you today, Phil?
I'm good. I'm just looking forward to ending all this anxiety that I'm having about this UFC heavyweight title. It's caused me so much stress.
Asterisk interim heavyweight title.
Look, I'll take what I can get right now just to calm all this nervousness that I've had since this title's been in limbo.
Well, this is a card that I don't doubt that Saturday night when we are doing our post show, I think we're going to get a number of really entertaining fights, and I think that will be, it will probably be an enjoyable card. But there are times you always hear the argument, Phil, that don't throw a card out the window until the fights happen. But the entire structure of fight promotion is in the pre-fight interest. That is going to indicate how a pay-per-view is going to perform. It's not after the fact, looking back at these were quality fights. It's what is the level of interest in the days leading up to it. I sense like very, very little interest for this card on Saturday. Is this even giving a benefit of the doubt? Is this a pay-per-view level card in your estimation? Sell me on it if you believe so.
Well, I mean, it is in the sense that there is a title fight at the top of the card, although we have to put a big asterisk on that. And Jose Aldo is fighting on this card. He is somebody who the pay-per-view audience is used to paying for. Of course, we lost a title fight when Amanda Nunes had to drop out, so that definitely takes some luster off of it. But the rest of the fights on the card are very good. So in terms of the quality level of all the fights, I do think it is likely to be to satisfy the pay-per-view buyer. But if you're the type of consumer who's really looking for that top fight as the decider, it's probably a pass.
Yeah, I can see that just being a card that, on paper, I think that there's some really intriguing fights. I mean, the Aldo fight and Luque versus Michael Chiesa. I think that those two fights are of great stakes for both divisions, and maybe Derrick Lewis and Ciryl Gane is, I think the interim title being thrown at this has provided criticism that's not necessarily warranted on these two fighters. I mean, what are they going to do? Say, no, you know what? I prefer the integrity of the title lineage, and thus we should not be fighting for an interim title. I mean, that's not their fault. This is a promotional decision to take a fight and add a bell and whistle to it that maybe they feel they needed, especially now that Amanda Nunes and Juliana Pena is off the card, which I was really looking forward to that fight. I think Juliana Pena, going back years ago, presented, she was an interesting prospect coming off of The Ultimate Fighter that showed a lot of ability that, she had the long time off after having a child, but that was an interesting fight, as interesting as you're going to get for Amanda Nunes, where there has just been such a difficulty finding challengers that you can viably sell to the public as being a threat to Amanda.
Yeah, and it was also returned to bantamweight for Amanda Nunes, and so that posed some interesting questions as well, because she had been fighting at featherweight for quite a while. But unfortunately, we're going to have to wait for that one.
So if you are on a strict budget, Phil, which I'm not accusing you of not being on, but let's just say that you had $65, and that is it for spending on fights this month. Okay. You can only spend that amount. It's this card and it's Tyron Woodley, Jake Paul. Where is Phil Chertok purchasing? Where is he putting his dollars?
So I'm going to put a wrench in your plan and put another fight in there, and that's Manny Pacquiao versus Errol Spence, which is happening this month. That I would
same night as SummerSlam, like right down the street. That's SummerSlam.
Oh, is it the same? Okay,
they're both taking place in Vegas, and they've like coordinated it so those that are at SummerSlam, the event will be over by 11 Eastern, so people can get over in time for the Pacquiao fight.
Oh, great. Yeah. I think they've done some really great promotion for this one, better than they have in the past. Pacquiao's training looks incredible. So that would be my pick, because I'm looking for the highest level of fighting, and Manny Pacquiao is a Hall of Famer and still at an incredible level, and this is a big fight in boxing. So that would be my pick. In terms of the Jake Paul thing, we touched on it. There's a curiosity there, but it's not high level fighting. And now, to Showtime's credit, they're putting on some real boxers on that undercard. So that it's a lot better, I think, than what Triller was doing. But still, it's not the type of fighting that if I only have $60 or $70 to spend, that wouldn't be it.
Yeah, and it's a $60 price tag for that Showtime pay-per-view at the end of the month with Woodley and Jake Paul. And I know that going into the Ben Askren fight, that was a lot of the concern, was the Jake Paul audience that he is bringing to this event. Are they the audience that is going to be spending money on a pay-per-view versus finding alternative means to find this fight? And I think you could just see from the fallout of that Triller pay-per-view that they were, they were threatening legal action against streamers. Like, you can tell it had all the indications that they took a bath on that pay-per-view.
Yeah, I think the fact that it switched now to Showtime, and Showtime put on the Mayweather versus Logan Paul fight. So I think this has a little bit, it's a different animal altogether. The Triller event had the whole circus sideshow feel to it, curiosity. I don't think this has that same level of carnival curiosity, even though it is this bizarre attraction.
Yeah, I think this is my level where, like, I do have an interest in Paul and Woodley. Vitor Belfort and Oscar De La Hoya, none.
Oh, that one's horrible. I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, Triller has another event that they're trying to put on this month as well with Teofimo Lopez. Vitor Belfort was supposed to be on that card. They moved him once he got the main event. So I'm really curious to see how that Triller event this month does, because that already got pushed back. And I don't think they're good. They definitely don't have the star power on that pay-per-view. So we're really going to see how effective.
A ton to get. They spent an enormous amount to get Lopez as well. So I mean, it's like they had to overspend to get him as well. So that is, just trying to make that work financially.
Yeah, and I mean, we're really going to see what is the power of the Triller promotional machine here.
Well, let us get into 265 on Saturday night. They are returning to the Toyota Center, where they ran back in May for the fight between Michael Chandler and Charles Oliveira. And it looks like the building will be close to, if not completely full, on Saturday night. So that is another testament to the Houston market, which, again, going back to their whole strategy here, was they have worked out an agreement with the city of Houston to bring several events here. And what they wanted was Francis Ngannou and Derrick Lewis on this date. And Ngannou was not going to be ready for this date. And once he was not around, and they just decided, well, this is our main event with Derrick Lewis, we will insert someone new and they will have a championship to fight for. And thus we have Saturday's main event. Ciryl Gane is 9-0. He has fought 6 times in the UFC with an unblemished record, and he is coming off decision wins over Jairzinho Rozenstruik and Alexander Volkov. So quality heavyweights that he has wins over to at least justify, I guess, 8 interim title fight. While Derrick Lewis has been competing with the UFC, this will be his 22nd fight in the UFC at the age of 36. And of course, he had a previous championship fight against Daniel Cormier in 2018, lost that fight, then had the loss to Junior Dos Santos. But after that, he has put together 4 wins in a row against Blagoy Ivanov, Ilir Latifi, Alexei Olenek, and knocking out Curtis Blades this past February. And interestingly enough, Bill, Ciryl Gane is the largest favorite on the entire card.
I guess that's not entirely too surprising if you look at the history of Derrick Lewis against elite strikers. He typically gets outstruck for most of the fight, unless he is only able to win if he's able to pull out some miracle knockout. And Ciryl Gane is somebody who's looked so sharp and made no mistakes. Of course, undefeated in the UFC, undefeated in MMA, undefeated in kickboxing. So the idea of him making a mistake to Derrick Lewis seems unlikely.
Some of the statistics here. So Derrick Lewis, a man noted for his power, and that would make, just even with these odds the way they are, I would be very nervous if I was just assuming Gane wins this fight. Which, if you break this down, technically, I mean, you can make a very compelling argument why Gane should win this fight. Derrick Lewis is someone that you will be at the edge of your seat for that entire 5 rounds of this guy who will be around late in a fight. He may get exhausted, but he has been able to show that famously against Alexander Volkov, coming back to win that fight, and is going to have that power. This from the UFC stats here, 2.59 significant strikes he lands per minute. Gane, on the other hand, 5.13 strikes per minute. That's an astounding total of Ciryl Gane and the offense Derrick Lewis could be facing on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, typically Lewis is a counter striker. He waits for his opponents to come in and likes to fire a counter shot. That's kind of why the original Francis Ngannou fight was so awful, because Ngannou didn't want to engage. And Lewis also has a habit of playing possum. He'll take some shots, make it look like he's really hurt, wait for the opponent to come in there and swing again. And all of that does create for some pretty exciting moments in the octagon.
Yeah, I mean, with Derrick Lewis, I think I don't think he always gets his due as a heavyweight. That, this is not a guy that just goes out there and is reckless. I mean, I think that he kind of puts out this image that makes it seem that way. But this is a guy that has navigated this heavyweight division, and I mean, a 16-5 record in the UFC over all of these years, and the guys that he has fought. I mean, to me, I would not place this guy at the absolute top tier of UFC heavyweights, but he's on the rung right below that.
Absolutely. He's very good at getting up whenever he gets taken down, with the exception of, like the elite wrestlers. He's able to find his way back up to his feet, usually able to get an underhook and stand up. And he's been improving. He's put a lot of effort into his conditioning in the last couple of years, and I do think it's made a difference. And I think he's earned a title shot. It's just that it's unfortunate that it happens in this fashion.
Now, another statistic to throw at you, Phil, is that Ciryl Gane has a 100% takedown defense percentage. Will that percentage be threatened on Saturday by Derrick Lewis?
I'm fairly confident that it will remain at 100% takedown defense, and probably the same amount of takedown defenses. I'm pretty confident Derrick Lewis is not going to go for any takedown in this fight. But hey, who knows? Maybe that's part of the strategy. Mix it up a little bit.
What has stood out to you against Ciryl Gane? Again, he's got the wins this year alone over Rosenstruck and Volkov. He's only 9 fights into his career, but I mean, from the get-go, he was looked upon as somebody that has a very high ceiling. He's 31 years of age, which in the heavyweight division is, not that advanced of an age. And I mean, are we looking at somebody that this could really catapult him into that top mix? Because a win here, it puts him on a collision course with a Francis Ngannou.
I think in terms of skill level, he's right there. He's earned a title shot as well, being undefeated in the UFC and defeating some top fighters. But the problem has been, the critique has been his style. He's not the most exciting in the octagon. Even in the few times he's gotten the finish, it's been after, some fairly plodding technical work, which, look, you can't blame him for. He's not making any mistakes, and it's up to his opponents to create opportunities for themselves. So I think a win over Derrick Lewis, if it's through his usual fashion of outpointing him for 5 rounds, that's not going to do too much for him. But that puts him in a title fight with Francis Ngannou, and, the world is your oyster at that point.
Have you been watching any of Embedded this week?
I have not.
You don't have to.
Okay.
Listen, Embedded certainly does have its pattern to it during fight week. This has to be one of the most unexciting. Dude, you're watching this. Ciryl Gane is at a golf range, just at firing off shots. Derrick Lewis is in the park doing wind sprints. Jose Aldo's cutting some weight. Michael Chiesa's jumping on his bed. Dude, nothing is happening. I watched all 3 episodes last night, and I have nothing to tell you after nearly 30 minutes of Embedded.
Well, I'm glad I got that recap, because that was probably more entertaining than me watching it. So thank you for that. But yeah, I've given up a lot on the UFC programming. Embedded is actually one of the ones that still you can kind of turn to every once in a while, typically, because you're just going through the rituals that they're doing through fight week, and that can be interesting sometimes, but I guess not in this case.
It really the one last month where, I mean, at the beginning of every Embedded, it is, includes paid promotion. I mean, they're very upfront about embedded advertising, but it's just so cringy when you go to like Stephen Thompson, who's just like relaxing and gives us a whole tutorial on this like zombie game on his iPhone. And
it's brutal.
Like,
no.
Man, it's like there's no subtlety to this at all, but that is a staple of Embedded. Last thing on this fight. Are you surprised at maybe the lack of I thought that John Jones would be the conversation involving John Jones would be a bit more this week, and maybe it'll amplify a little into the weekend. But coming out of this, like, you're essentially going to have a fight in place with the winner of this, presumably for Francis Ngannou, and that only pushes back any sort of plans with John Jones. It just feels like John Jones has been put off into the corner, and people understand his reasons for that. But I mean, the UFC is just moving on, and it seems that not a whole lot of attention is being placed upon John Jones until this stalemate is figured out. Like, it doesn't seem like there's a ton of like public demand for this to be figured out. It's on the UFC's timetable.
Yeah, it really is. There seems to be a standstill about the money, and the UFC does seem to have at least a couple options for Francis Ngannou in the meantime. But if he is able to get through, Lewis and Gane and continues his path of destruction, I do think eventually the public is going to clamor for this fight, and the UFC and John Jones are going to be able to come to terms. If anything, it just builds anticipation for the ultimate fight if it happens. And if John Jones is going to get a share of the revenue, then it's just going to be more money in his pocket. So I think from his perspective, he's okay to wait for the biggest payday possible. And the UFC, they'll come to terms with him when it's lucrative enough for them.
So I guess Dana White this week did an interview on the Full Send podcast, and this was transcribed by bjpenn.com. He said, "Me and Jones have had that type of relationship his whole career. When he's ready to fight, we are ready to go. He's talking about fighting at heavyweight, but in the heavyweight division right now, we're going back to Houston. Derrick Lewis is taking on Ciryl Gane, and whoever wins that fight will fight Francis Ngannou. Whoever wins that fight, if John Jones wants to come back, he can fight one of them, or he can fight Stipe Miocic. Stipe has accepted that fight and will take that fight." White added that Jones won't fight until next year.
Yeah, it seems like both the parties have sort of cooled their sort of nastier public negotiations. John Jones has new management, or at least some new advisors helping him. So I think that everybody wants to come to the same deal. They want him to fight. They want it to be against Ngannou and be the biggest fight possible. Or even Stipe, that would be a big fight. But I think the Ngannou one makes more sense. So it's just a matter of timing and money. And I do think that they will come to terms eventually.
Moving on down the main card, Jose Aldo continues his campaign at bantamweight with his 4th fight at 135 pounds, taking on longtime veteran Pedro Munhoz. Aldo is coming off of that split decision loss to Marlon Moraes, which earned him a title fight, and then losing to Petr Yan by TKO. Munhoz, this will be his 15th fight in the UFC, and he is coming off of a unanimous decision victory over Jimmy Rivera back in February. And this has all the makings to be an outstanding fight. And Jose Aldo, I think I make this point every time Jose Aldo fights. The guy is 34 years old, and that's shocking to me when you look at what this guy was doing in 2007 and still being like, you may not be looking at Jose Aldo prime Jose Aldo, but this is still a version of himself that I think can be competitive with the top bantamweights.
Absolutely. You actually neglected his last fight, which was a win over Marlon Vera at the end of 2020.
Oh, that's right. That's right. The decision win over Vera. That was last December.
Yeah. So, we're talking about, and even that Mariah fight was very close. Of course, a lot of people thought that he won. He got a title fight out of it. So he is definitely still able to compete with the best. He's one of the most exciting fighters in the UFC. People get very excited to see him fight. And this fight in particular against Pedro Munhoz, somebody else who has a history, I don't know how many performance of the nights he's had, plenty in his career. So this fight just has fireworks all over it. But I think maybe to your larger point about Aldo is he's incredible. He's elite, but he is, it just feels like he's a peg short of the top of that division. But the UFC loves him, and it wouldn't shock me to see him get another title fight if he can get a couple wins together.
Our fun stats of this fight: Pedro Munhoz lands on average 5.6 significant strikes per minute. However, he absorbs 5.87 strikes per minute.
That's not a good. That's not a good ratio. Yeah.
So I mean, this is a fight that could be complete fireworks. It'll be very interesting. Like, these are two guys with tremendous takedown defense, especially Jose Aldo, and I think that this one is largely going to stay on the feet and could very well be 3 rounds. But this is going to test Jose Aldo to certainly see where. Like, I'm with you. I think that this is a guy that is a top 5 bantamweight, but once we are getting into that top 5, that's where I don't know how much Jose Aldo progresses if he is fighting a Corey Sandhagen, even a TJ Dillashaw that we just saw return, much less a Aljamain Sterling or Petr Yan. But with Jose Aldo getting a win here, like, to your point, Phil, like, he has got that name identity and can leapfrog a lot of people. Like, you have Yan and Sterling, and in theory, you could be looking at TJ Dillashaw, but I think Dillashaw is going to have to fight again. That very well could be a pairing we see coming out of this.
Yeah,
I mean, to be honest.
Yeah, I think, and that's a really exciting one. I do think that TJ said he had some type of injury coming out of the fight. So, obviously, he had that
knee pop, right?
That's right. And the cut as well, which forced him to delay the fight initially, and it opened up there. So it might be some time for him. So, timing's going to play a big factor. Hopefully the Yan Sterling fight does go off as it's scheduled to at the end of October. But if they've matched up Aldo versus TJ, that's a really exciting fight that I think fans would get excited about.
Yeah. Also in this whole bantamweight mix is Dominick Cruz, who will be on commentary. No Joe Rogan this Saturday. It will be John Anik with Daniel Cormier and Dominick Cruz for the night.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, not far from Rogan's new home of Austin, Texas. So I guess he had better things to do.
Michael Chiesa and Vicente Luque. This might be my favorite fight on the card. I think this is a very important fight at 170 pounds. Michael Chiesa has been unbeaten since he made the move up from lightweight, where, every time we watch this guy fight, it's a miracle this guy was able to make lightweight as long as he did. He submitted Carlos Condit, got a decision win against Diego Sanchez, a decision against RDA, and is coming off a decision over Neil Magny. Conversely, Vicente Luque, he has a 13-3 record in the UFC and has won his last 3, defeating Nico Price, Randy Brown, and his last fight was against Tyron Woodley in what turned out to be Woodley's last fight in the UFC. He has won 9 of his last 10 fights, the lone blemish in that stretch to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in November of 2019. I think this is a pretty simple fight to break down, Phil. I think that Vicente Luque is an elite level striker, and Michael Chiesa has been somebody that when he is able to get position on top of you, this guy is nasty with his grappling and submission ability as well. Do you lean like one way or the other? I think this is a very difficult fight to break down, and with Michael Chiesa, we have not seen him fight in a year and a half since the beginning of 2020.
Yeah, I think style-wise, you nailed it. It's a classic grappler versus striker. Chiesa has looked incredible since moving up to welterweight. Just like a blanket on top of all of his opponents. He looks like he's a middleweight fighting at welterweight. So the idea that he ever fought at lightweight is just ludicrous.
I don't think this guy would have trouble fighting at middleweight, to be quite honest with you. Like,
yeah,
maybe a little undersized against some, but he would fit into that division without too many. Like, put a Adesanya next to a Michael Chiesa, like, it's not as stark a size difference as I think.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they're probably very similar in size. And then on the flip end, we've got Vicente Luque, who's
very nice,
been incredible in the UFC. I mean, you mentioned his one loss in recent years to Stephen Thompson. You go back further, his only other loss without being on The Ultimate Fighter was against Leon Edwards, so somebody else who's at the top of the division. So we're clearly talking about somebody who's the best of the best, and this division is just timing has prevented him from getting that title shot. But, you know, with his big win over Tyron Woodley in his last fight, a finish, and this big showcase fight, I think the winner of this fight is likely to set themselves up for a big match with Gilbert Burns. And it would be hard to argue to not give the winner of that a title shot.
I think
Leon Edwards.
I was going to say, I see Leon Edwards being the recipient of this winner as well. Like, Burns and Edwards seem to be, it's funny. Burns is like, he's had his title fight and lost. Edwards has not had his title fight yet, but he's being treated as though he's already lost. Yes, he does have a prior fight with Usman, but I think everyone understands what point I'm trying to make. I think Leon Edwards is going to be in the waiting room for a long time in this welterweight division, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think he was trying to at least get some name fights. He's trying to call out some notables to keep himself busy and make himself relevant. But I think the only way that he's going to get his title shot is if he just creates some noise, which is kind of sad.
Do you think in this modern time period for Michael Chiesa, like, here is a guy that is a product of The Ultimate Fighter, arguably, I would say, the toughest season of Ultimate Fighter because of the length that they had to spend there. He's a UFC analyst. How much does that go into, you know, the matchmaking process? Like, do you think that gives him a significant edge when it comes down to, you know, deciding between him and another contender of who gets the bigger fight?
I do think it makes a difference. I also think it makes a difference when they're selecting fight night main events. His last fight was a fight night main event, and I think he's a great analyst, actually. I really enjoy him on the broadcasts, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a more prominent role. The only concern that I have, of course, is just doing double duty, being an analyst while you're fighting, and you know, if you're calling the fights of guys that, you know, you're competing against. But I've never seen a problem with his analysis in that regard, any bias or obvious bias. But I do think it plays a factor in deciding if he's going to get a title fight over somebody else, especially somebody else who's maybe potentially not an English speaker or something like that.
I should add that if we are going to isolate a highlight for Embedded, it was Michael Chiesa getting on top of his bed and addressing the cameraman saying, "What, you want me to do something? Here, I'm jumping on the bed." And then he goes, "I know I'm not Paige Van Zandt here."
Well, amazing. I mean, he knows, hey, look, he knows how to create content, right? He made it to the show with that performance.
This should be a great fight, and it's a very important one at welterweight. You know, it's always, I think, going to be it's going to be one of those divisions where we have a super dominant champion in Kamaru Usman, but nonetheless, like, it's like that's the game. It's creating challengers, and one of these two ascends very high in the welterweight picture. I would say that if it's an impressive win, they probably leapfrog Leon Edwards, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I think so. It's just that, you know, it's all about the timing of these fights, when they can get another one in. But yeah, especially Chiesa. I think he's on a roll right now. And the fact that he's an analyst, and a former Ultimate Fighter winner, I think all that plays a big factor in the UFC, eager to promote him.
The rest of the main card features a rematch from UFC 188 in June of 2015. That was the infamous card where it was Cain Velasquez fighting at Elevation against Fabricio Verdum. That night, Tecia Torres won by unanimous decision. So here we are 6 years later. And these two had been scheduled to fight back in December, but then Hill tested positive for COVID. Torres has lost, she had lost 4 in a row between 2018 and 19, losing decisions to Jessica Andrade, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Zhang Wei Li, and then Marina Rodriguez, and is now coming off wins over Brianna Van Buren and Sam Hughes. While Angela Hill had fought 4 times last year, ending with split decision losses to Claudia Gadelha and Michelle Watterson, and just beat Ashley Yoder back in March. And then opening the main card is a bantamweight fight between Song Yadong and Casey Kenney, which should be a pretty action-packed 135-pound fight to kick off the main card.
Yeah, Angela Hill and Tecia Torres. Tecia Torres, you mentioned that 4-fight losing streak, but you look at those opponents, we're talking about the best in the division there. She's somebody who's got unlimited cardio, and she looked great in her last 2 fights. Angela Hill is somebody who's sort of just fallen short of really looking elite. She's had some awful luck with fight cancellations in the last few years. I mean, you mentioned she fought 4 times. She probably could have fought 8 times last year, minus all those schedule changes. And then Song Yadong versus Casey Kenney. I think that's a pretty exciting fight as well. Casey Kenney coming off that loss to Dominick Cruz. He's a really good fighter. I'm really interested to see how he adjusts and comes back. And there's a pretty good fight at the top of the preliminary card as well.
Yes.
I really like Bobby Green versus Fiziev there.
Yeah, Rafael Fiziev is 9-1, and yes, it's I double checked pronunciation here, so we're on the right track here. But he is a lot of people are very high on him, and Bobby Green he's a really strong lightweight challenge for him at this stage of his career. Bobby Green, like we talk about Angela Hill, this guy fought 4 times last year, but that was saying last year doesn't even properly put into context. He fought 4 times between June and October. And in that stretch, he won 3 of the 4 fights against Clay Guida, Lando Venata, and Alan Patry. And then he's coming off that loss to Thiago Moises in October. So this guy just had an insane stretch of 4 months here.
Yeah, he's somebody who's he's a very skilled fighter, always somebody who's had a lot of potential, but just couldn't put it together in the octagon, had some injuries, had some, just some mental, I don't want to say mental health issues, just sort of like mind game issues in the cage that he had to overcome. And it looked like he was making quite a bit of a run there in that, short window of 4 fights. He did lose to Moises, but he's still a really exciting fighter. And as you mentioned, a very tough test for Fizzy.
And then the prelims also feature Vince Morales versus Drako Rodriguez at bantamweight. Ed Herman at the age of 40. First fight in the UFC was in 2006. It takes on Alonzo Menifield at light heavyweight. Menifield has 8 first-round finishes, including an 8-second win on the Contender Series, which gives him the same length of time that AJ McKee beat Georgi Karahanyan in. Though I bet the call for McKee's win was the superior one, as more Ronaldo proclaimed, quicker than a TikTok video. And then opening the prelims is Karolina Kowalkiewicz against Jessica Penne. This is kind of a crossroads fight, I would say, for both women at strawweight. Kowalkiewicz, who is, she has fought like a lot of the quality strawweights in the division, including challenging for the title back in 2015. But she has lost her last 4 going back to September of 2018. And I mean, a bit surprised, like she is 2-6 in the UFC. Jessica Penne, of course, she lost 4 years between 2017 and 2021, and then returned this past April, getting a split decision win over Luque Godinez after that whole losing stretch. So I would say, Kowalkiewicz is 35, Penne is 38. I would say both. It's kind of must-win territory, I would say, for both individuals, and that's including Penne coming off a win. I think that this would be a pretty tough loss at this portion after losing such a big chunk of her, prime fighting years.
I totally agree. It's just definitely for Penne. It's like make a run here and show the UFC what you got. And for Kowalkiewicz, you definitely need a win here because they haven't been the most impressive performances, dominating losses, and hasn't really shown, pep in her step, any, sense of urgency. So hopefully she shows it here and we get a good fight because so much is on the line for both of them.
And the early prelims have Manel Kape versus Ode Osbourne at flyweight, Anderson Dos Santos versus Miles Johns at 135 pounds, flyweight women's fight between Victoria Leonardo and Melissa Gatto, and then a bantamweight fight opens the prelims with Johnny Munhoz Jr. versus Jamie Simmons. So that is coming your way on Saturday night, UFC 265. I think going in with like measured expectations, this is certainly not the most star-studded lineup, but I certainly think you can find some interesting stories, and I think there's the potential for some great fights. I'm going to put you on the spot, Phil, that of the main card fights, how many decisions do you foresee? Because as I look at this, I could see quite a few. What is your prognostication?
I'm going to say we're going to get one finish on the main card.
I don't think that's a crazy pick. I don't know which it's going to be, but I mean, Torres and Angela Hill, I think could be a lock to go 3. Chiesa and Luque, I would venture to guess very likely could go 3. Aldo and Munhoz is one where it could just be a hard fought 15 minutes. It could also be someone just lands that shot, which I could certainly see a stoppage there. And Lewis and Gane, yeah, it could end at any minute of the 25. It could also go 25 minutes. And I think if it goes 25, I don't know if there's going to be a lot of praise being heaped on a 5-round heavyweight main event between these two, but we shall see.
Yeah, if this starts looking like a typical Ciryl Gane fight in Houston, fans might want to mute the television because the boos will be coming down fast and furious.
Were you alerted to the news, Phil, that come this October, that the winner of the Fedor sweepstakes to fight him in Moscow has been awarded to Tim Johnson?
I did find that out. I think who posted it in the chat today? I think it was Brandon from New Jersey was the one who shared that information with us. So yeah, I did know that. Yeah, kind of surprising, actually. Not a big name. I mean, somebody who's been on Bellator television in the last couple of years, but a huge guy, and somebody that I just would not want on top of Fedor to close out his career.
No, I mean, Johnson is coming off that loss to Valentin Moldavsky, but I mean, he went 5 hard rounds with him. I mean, I think that this is probably not going to be a great ending for Fedor Emelianenko. I think Tim Johnson, like stylistically, is just in 2021. I don't know how many heavyweights you necessarily line up for Fedor that you'd just be looking at. This is just show up and Fedor is going to remind everyone what it was like in 2005. I think it was going to be tough pickings to begin with. That's why I looked at Jake Hager as being someone that probably had as much a chance as anyone of getting this fight.
Mm-hmm. I guess Scott Coker and Bellator are deciding, let's try to promote somebody that we have, somebody who's going to be with us. Hopefully they get the W. And if not, then it's a great send-off for Fedor.
All right. Well, that's going to wind things down. Phil, we are going to be back on Saturday night. As soon as the main event is over, you can flip it over here at youtube.com/postwrestling, where we will be going live with a full rundown of the UFC 265 card. And as always, the Discord is going to be rocking on Saturday night, starring Phil Chertok, Brandon from New Jersey. Eric will be absent on Saturday night, but I mean, the whole crew will be there. New MMA fanatic, our man Neil, I'm sure will be all over Derrick Lewis, Ciryl Gane.
That's right. Yes. We will be having fight polls as usual. So you can come into the Discord and chat with other postmarks during the event and vote on who is going to win. And we have a leaderboard, so we keep track of everything throughout the year. Right now, Eric is on top of the leaderboard. He is the #1 post prognosticator. But it's a lot of fun. So head on over to postwrestling.com/Discord and join us on Saturday night.
Yes, and for everyone that are big fans of the excellent reports that Eric does for all the UFCs, it will be a little delayed, but he will have a UFC 265 report on the site, because even though he has alternate plans, he will make sure that he is there from fight number one right through the end.
The consummate professional. You might, you know, he's such a professional. You want to honor him in some way. And the best way, I think, to honor him would be by buying your own Eric MMA Marcotte limited edition t-shirt. These are on sale at store.postwrestling.com right now. From now until the end of August, limited edition t-shirts on sale for a limited amount of time. Get it now while they're hot. One of the best-selling t-shirts in post history.
I mean, it's popping up everywhere. We got Dickie Bird modeling the shirt. This is the phenomenon that is sweeping the post MMA crossover. It's this shirt that Eric Marcotte has just shown everybody what they're here for.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't taken it off since I got mine.
That's gross. It's really hot out these days here.
It just tells you how much affection I have for it.
Well, you too can have a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week t-shirt from store.postwrestling.com. Go check that out. It's available throughout the month of August, and we are going to be back Saturday night. Tune in for that. Way will be live on Friday night with Rewind to SmackDown, joined by Kape from Montreal. They'll be live at 10:15 Eastern for members of the Post Wrestling Cafe. And then the weekend rounds out with the NWA podcast dropping on Sunday with Nate Milton, Chris Ely, and Andrew Thompson. So check out all of that great stuff at postwrestling.com. Phil, as always, thank you for steering the ship, and looking forward to 265 on Saturday night, and maybe I'll have an update on what episodes 4, 5, and 6 of Embedded bring to us.
I can't wait. I think that will be my highlight of Sunday morning, Saturday night.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe it'll just be a whole episode of Michael Chiesa embedded by being embedded.
By being embedded,
he was jumping on his bed.
The bedded. I was thinking that you were doing another embedded product placement joke. So
no, but he might. Who knows? We will find out. Maybe who will be the fighter that has to sell us on the latest.
Maybe he could have an embedded, where it's like Sealy Posturepedic mattresses are sponsoring him on top of the bed. You know.
Well, there you go. The intricate product placement of UFC sponsors. That is the draw of 265 Embedded. That's it for us. Thank you, everybody, for joining us live or after the fact. Goodbye. We'll speak with you Saturday night.